Welcome to Guilty Gifts and Crafts long-form videos. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about lathe chucks and work holding on the lathe. So come along, let's learn a little. Hey everybody, welcome to my shop. So today I want to talk a little bit about lathe accessories. The primary accessory I'm going to talk about is lathe chucks today. I'm known for my wood turning. I am a full service shop. I do a little bit of everything. I do furniture building and things on the CNC. I have a fully tooled shop, but I do a lot of wood turning videos and a lot of time wood turning. And because of that, I'm known for it a little bit. So I get asked a lot of questions about the lathe and accessories for the lathe. So today I want to talk a little bit about that primary accessory that a lot of people are familiar with, but don't necessarily know the ins and outs of, and that's lathe chucks. So let's get started. So welcome to my workshop on the various types of lathe chucks for wood turning. Today we're going to be exploring some of the various types of lathe chucks used in wood turning and how each one can help you achieve different results in your projects. I do have several chucks in my collection to show, but I'm also going to cover a few that I don't have on hand. For those, I'll try and put an image in or something just for reference. I may also mention some brands while we get through this, but none of this video is sponsored, and all the accessories I show were purchased by me and not provided by companies. So there are several options available when looking to add chucks to your lathe accessory collection. They fall into a handful of different types. Faceplate chucks, collet chucks, threaded chucks or worm screw chucks, mandrel chucks, scroll chucks, adjustable and independent jaw chucks, vacuum chucks, and shop-made friction chucks such as jam chucks. So something to consider when exploring chucks for your lathe is how they'll mount to the headstock. Many chucks use the threaded portion of your headstock to mount, so you will need to know the size and the thread pattern of your particular lathe headstock to assure that you buy a chuck that will fit properly. Now, oftentimes you can also find adapters that will secure to the chuck with a set screw to allow the chuck to work on incompatible threads. Headstock threads are measured by their diameter and the number of threads per inch. So there's a bunch of different common sizes out there, such as 1 inch by 8 TPI, which is threads per inch. There's 1 1/4 by 8 TPI. And on some smaller lathes, you'll also find 3/4 by 16 TPI. Many European lathes adhere to the M33 by 3.5 millimeter thread pitch standard, but there are various other standards, so just be sure you know yours. Another way to mount some chucks is by using the Morse taper on your lathe, and this is really common in mandrel chucks especially. And they generally adhere to the standard number 1 and number 2 Morse tapers, though some of the larger lathes can even use up to the number 3 Morse taper, and some very large industrial lathes might use all the way up to the number 7. That's really beefy. So generally in woodworking, what we see is the number 1 through number 3 Morse tapers, with the number 1 and the number 2 being the most common. Now be aware of both the Morse taper size and the thread measurements for your lathe when you're buying chucks of any type, just to save yourself that time and hassle of returning things that don't work. So let's start looking at the various chucks you can use in your wood turning journey too. So we're going to get started with the faceplate chuck. This is one of the most traditional chucks in wood turning, and likely one of the first types you'll use when you get started with bowl turning or platter turning. These are generally provided as part of every new lathe. Now, faceplates mount to your lathe headstock using the headstock threads, and many include a small set screw to ensure they stay tightly in place while you're sanding in reverse, if your lathe happens to have that feature. A faceplate can be ideal for turning larger or irregularly shaped pieces such as bowls and platters. You attach your workpiece directly to the faceplate using screws through the screw holes. This offers a secure hold for heavy-duty turning. Now, you do need to plan your turning so that the mounting screws do not leave holes in your finished workpiece. Traditionally, we turn the shape of and the form of the bowl on the outside first, which leaves those holes in the waist of the inside of the bowl. But if you're turning thinner pieces, such as a platter or a shallow bowl, this is something that can be limiting. Now, a typical workaround for this problem is to glue up a sacrificial block to your blank and then mount the faceplate on the block. This is a really secure way to hold work to your lathe, and is traditionally probably one of the very first types of a chuck we all use. Again, like I said, these come bundled with most lathes, so you get that opportunity right up front without any expenditure. So the next type of chuck I'd like to talk about is collet chucks. Collet chucks are designed for a smaller diameter turning and precision work. The collet mechanism, it's familiar to most of us from our use of routers. It tightens evenly around the workpiece, resulting in a strong, balanced hold. Now, I don't have any collet chucks available. I don't use them myself. I do have some collets from a large spindle I have for my CNC machine. They're very similar to a collet chuck. And what you see here is you would insert your workpiece into the hole, and as you tighten down the collet, it tightens down evenly all the way around the workpiece. So I'll put up a picture of some common collet chucks. But this creates a really strong and balanced hold the way a collet tightens around a piece. Now, all the collet chucks that I've seen have mounted to the headstock via headstock threads. This is a style chuck that I don't have any real experience using myself. I've always had other ways to hold my work, even smaller diameter work. So if you do have experience using a collet chuck, good or bad, leave a comment and tell us about it, and maybe we can get a discussion started and talk a little bit more about them. So the next chuck to talk about is worm screw chucks or threaded chucks. Threaded chucks and worm screw chucks are really similar, but usually serve different purposes. A threaded chuck is usually a chuck that serves a specific purpose. For instance, this chuck is used when I make handles for coffee scoops, all of which mount using a 3/8 inch coarse thread. This particular one mounts on the headstock via the headstock threads, but I've also seen commercially available ones that can mount via the Morse taper of the lathe. Now, these can be shop made or purchased. I actually have a shop made one here, and they can be done in various thread sizes and are generally confined to very specific jobs. On the other hand, a screw or a worm screw chuck can be a standalone chuck, or more commonly, part of a chuck system of a scroll type chuck, which we'll cover next. This type of work holding is generally used with a bowl or a hollow form turning. As the outside of the former bowl is formed and shaped, the worm screw provides a very strong and stable mounting, and the hole left behind is eliminated when the bowl or the form is hollowed out. This type of chuck is quick and easy to set up. It only requires one hole to be drilled, but it's best used when you're turning cross grain work such as a bowl. The screw can easily pull out of the grain when the grain is parallel to the lathe bed, as in an end grain box or a hollow form on the end grain. Now, standalone versions usually feature either a headstock thread mounting, similar to this one, or a Morse taper mounting that include a flat surface at the end of the worm screw to provide support for the stock when it's screwed on. The chuck system incorporated type is usually held by the inside of the medium-sized jaws of a scroll chuck. After the workpiece is screwed on, it will reference directly up against the jaws of the chuck, and that's where you get your support for the workpiece. This is one method I use for mounting bowl blanks to turn the outside. It's a quick method that holds well, but check what size hole you need to drill, because if you drill it too big, it's very easy to strip that out. This type of holding, like I said, is best on cross grain timber. If the grain's running parallel to the bed, the screw can pull out very easily. So do make sure that the item is flat against the jaw face. On larger blanks, I would use a faceplate, as in the previous type we talked about. I've made a small version that fits the chuck jaws for small items, but generally you want to use this for a larger item. So the next one we're going to talk about is mandrel chucks. Mandrel chucks are something many wood turners are introduced to early in their wood turning journey. Pen turning is a very common gateway to bring people into wood turning. And the most common method to hold pen blanks while shaping them on a lathe is a mandrel chuck. This is one example of a mandrel chuck. Mandrel chucks mount to the headstock in both methods. Some are Morse tapers and some mount directly to the headstock threads. Now I don't have one to show that mounts to the headstock threads, but this is a Morse taper number 2 that slides in. They hold your workpiece by passing through a pre-drilled hole in the stock. So your stock goes in the middle, and then you're compressing between the headstock and the tailstock end. The compression's achieved either through a threaded nut, like this particular mandrel, or as in this one, it can also be achieved through a specialized tailstock live center that allows the mandrel to pass through and provides the pressure in that way to compress the piece. Now I can't say I've seen many other uses for mandrel chucks aside from pen turnings and some other small items similar to pens. But if you've seen or have experience with other uses for the mandrel chuck, mention it in the comments and we'll discuss it. Now the next two categories are often confused. They look very similar to each other, but there's some very distinct differences that make one much easier to use. Scroll chucks and adjustable independent jaw chucks look and function in a very similar way, but scroll chucks are much more common and likely the type you've seen the most in wood turning. Now I'll explain the differences while I talk about each one. So scroll chucks are versatile and widely used by wood turners and are most certainly the chuck envisioned by most people when you bring up the subject of using a chuck on a lathe to hold workpieces for turning. Scroll chucks are mounted to the headstock on the spindle threads, and some come equipped with 1 or 2 set screws to assure a tight connection even when reversing the spindle for sanding. Now, while most feature adjustable and interchangeable jaws, what makes them different from regular jaw chucks or adjustable jaw chucks is that the mechanism to tighten the jaws operates all of the jaws in unison so that they open and close in an equal pattern. So you can see when I turn the key, all 4 jaws move simultaneously and equally. So that gives you an equilateral force to all 4 jaws. So tightening of the 4 jaws on a scroll chuck is achieved through either a key made specifically for the chuck, like the one I just showed, or this one that's for my Barracuda 4 chuck made by Penn State Industries, or by a set of Tommy bars that turn opposite of each other to turn 2 plates on the bottom of the chuck, and that then in turn turns the gears and gives you the tightening. This keeps the center of the holding force in the center of the chuck and therefore on the center line of the headstock of the lathe. It provides uniform pressure to all 4 jaws. Most scroll chucks use 4 jaws, but I've also come across several that use 2 or 3 jaws. Pen turners, of course, will be familiar with a 2-jaw version of a scroll chuck that's used to hold a pen blank while drilling out the center using a tailstock mounted Jacobs drill chuck to hold the drill bit stationary while the stock being drilled is spun around the headstock. So I'll show a few scroll chucks. This is, like I said, the most common chuck people think about when you think about a wood turning chuck. I have 2 here. This is my Barracuda 4 chuck made by Penn State Industries. This is probably my favorite chuck. It's very large, it's very heavy, good and heavy duty. This is an off-brand name chuck bought from Amazon. Very capable chuck. I've had no problems with it. It works great. The Barracuda 4 came stock with 4 sets of jaws. So this is a small jaw, a medium jaw, the large jaws, and then what we call a pin jaw. And the pin jaw has a very small pin at the top and a larger step down pin at the bottom. And then of course, the Barracuda 4 comes with its own specialized key. And this off-brand name chuck that I got from Amazon works very similarly. It's got a large jaw set, a pin jaw set, and a small jaw set. And generally, these can be used interchangeably. Now, Scroll chucks can be used to hold a lot of different types of stock, including bowl and platter stock, hollow form stock, and even spindle stock where the grain runs parallel to the lathe bed. They provide excellent holding force and can vary in capacity based on the different jaws that you can use. The size of the chuck itself can also affect what types of jaws can be used. These chucks are also capable of holding both square and round stock depending on which jaws you use. Now, work holding can be achieved on the outside of a piece of stock, often on a tenon, similar to on this bowl right here. You could squeeze this tenon by clamping the jaws inward to achieve the holding force. These can also be used with an outward force by clamping the jaws in a pre-drilled mortise, often used in bowl or hollow forms. Similar to what I have here, I could put this chuck into this mortise and open the jaws to give that clamping force. Different types of jaws are also available in varying sizes, like we just covered here. You can incorporate inward and outward facing dovetails on the edge of your jaw sets, and that can give additional stability and holding power. Now, to increase the capacity of a scroll chuck, a set of coal jaws can be attached. These coal jaws are a little different than other jaws in a standard scroll chuck setup. They allow a much larger capacity, but a much lighter holding force. These are generally used in finishing bowl and platter feet after completing the inside of profile and require a much lighter touch when engaging the tool to the workpiece. When using the mortise style holding method where you clamp the jaws inside and open them up, you end up with a mortise on your bowl. By using the coal jaws, you can mount to the outside and hold your piece while you gently bring that in, and you can make a very nice finished foot on a bowl that looks much better than if you simply left a hard ridge with that mortise. So the next style I want to talk about is very similar to a scroll chuck, and that is the adjustable independent jaw chuck. These generally come in 2, 3, or 4 jaw configurations, and they look exactly like a scroll chuck. The difference is, on an independent jaw chuck, each one of the jaws is aligned and moved independently, so they don't move together, so that the workpieces of various shapes and sizes can be used on the lathe. This makes them highly adaptable to oddly shaped stock. This provides versatility, but also creates more work when mounting your workpiece. Unfortunately, I couldn't even find a good picture of a set of independent jaw chucks. They're few and far between. You won't come across them very often. The clamping force on this type of a chuck is often difficult to balance across all 4 jaws due to each jaw being set independently of the others. While this type of a chuck can occasionally be found in a wood turner shop, they are much more often associated with machine shops and metal turning. I would definitely like to learn a little bit more about those independent jaw chucks myself. So for sure, like I said, if you have any background with them, drop it in the comments and we can talk about it a little bit more, maybe open up a little bit of a dialogue. And if anybody has pictures of an independent jaw chuck, please feel free to send those to me. You can find my email address on my profile. So the next chuck we're going to talk about is probably one of those chucks that a lot of people have heard about. Occasionally people have seen them, but not a lot of people have used them. And I think they're becoming more and more common, but that's a vacuum chuck. A vacuum chuck uses suction to hold your workpiece in place. They mount using the spindle threads on the headstock, and they require a headstock with a pass-through hole to the outboard hand wheel side to accommodate the vacuum tube and then the fitting for the vacuum pump. These are specialty chucks that require an additional expense for the vacuum pump to achieve that hold, but they're particularly useful for finishing pieces or removing tenons without leaving marks. This chuck type is best suited for lightweight projects. Larger bowls are okay once they're finished because they've gotten a lot lighter, but lightweight projects require a gentle but firm grip. While in the past, these have been really expensive option. Recent years, they've become more affordable. There are more of them available on the market. I believe this one came from a company called Simple Wood Turning Tools. and I purchased it on Amazon. I believe this was under $120. So if that gives you a little bit of an idea of where the price on these is now, they are much more affordable than they used to be. The tube turns independently on a set of bearings inside, and that provides the suction inside, but also still allows the chuck to turn independently. Now, vacuum pumps can be a little expensive, but those have also come down in a reasonable price. So it does also come with an added noise factor when the pump's running. But for finishing a bowl foot, the initial vacuum's generally enough to sustain the hold without leaving the pump running. If you're going to do more than that, sometimes you may need to leave your pump running so that that vacuum can continually be refreshed. So let me know in the comments what your experience is using vacuum chucks. So we're down to the very last one. This one can be pretty easy to work with. So a lot of people make their own chucks. Generally, they are friction fit chucks where you have a friction fit between the chuck and your workpiece. And oftentimes they're called jam chucks or friction chucks, but usually these are shop-made chucks. I have two here. This jam chuck was used for ornaments that I was making one year where the hole in the ornament was on the end, and I was able to jam my ornament into this and hold this in my standard scroll chuck. Jamming the ornament hole on here gave me a friction fit around this ring, enough that I could do sanding and final finish work on the piece. This particular jam chuck was used for a handle with a large ball on the end where I needed to finish the other end. So jamming it in here gave me a friction fit that gave me enough hold to be able to turn this. But these are generally a category that's personal for each wood turner. They tend to be specialized to each wood turner's work. They're shop-made chucks that are made specifically for the projects a turner's taken on and are made to meet those specific needs. I rarely use jam chucks now myself, as all the commercial chucks I have always seem to work for most of the projects I've taken on, but occasionally I do need to make one. Another example of jam chucks is people early in their wood turning journey who are wanting to make bowls and don't have a way to finish the feet on their bowls often will make a larger jam chuck that a bowl can slide onto with a piece of leather or a towel to hold it tight while you finish up the foot. And that's a great way to finish a foot on one. Jam chucks were the go-to for any time I needed to hold a workpiece and I didn't have the proper commercial accessories, because commercial chucks obviously come with an expense. They're a huge convenience, but there's a fair amount of cost. And early in your woodworking journey or your wood turning journey, many don't have the ability to splurge on those accessories when turning tools are really the priority up front. You know, we all start with very few turning tools, and you need to build your turning tool collection, and turning tools can be expensive. Scrapers and bowl gouges, spindle gouges and roughing gouges, one gouge after another, one tool after another. The price can really add up, and oftentimes that can prevent you from having the extra funds to be able to buy a commercial scroll chuck or another type of a commercial chuck. So jam chucks give you the ability to do some of what you can do with a commercial chuck or something that you purchase versus something you can make in the shop. So they help reduce that cost to entry and can give you the opportunity to do some turnings that you wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity to do till you can afford the higher end tools. So that pretty much concludes all of the chucks that I've used and seen. I'm sure there are some others that I've missed, but I hope this little tutorial will at least give you some place to start and it'll help you select the best tools for your wood turning needs. Remember, there's lots and lots of accessories out there. There's a lot of companies that are offering things. Some are good, some are bad. If you're not sure when you're going to buy, go out and find resources. Find people who have used the various types of chucks you're looking at, or find people who have used the particular brand you're looking to buy and get advice. Talk to the wood turners around you. Find a wood turners group that's local. Find one online. I have found in my time wood turning, which is about 40 years now, that wood turners are very open. There is no gatekeeping in wood turning. People like to talk about how they do things. They like to pass on knowledge. Wood turners love to teach other wood turners new techniques, and talking about the accessories that you use on your lathe is just another part of that. Remember, each one of these chucks offers unique benefits. Choosing the right one can make your work safer, more efficient, and more enjoyable. So just be careful when you're working with your tools. Always follow all the safety guides. Do the best you can. And every day is a learning experience. 40 years later, I still learn every time I stand at my lathe. So have a great time and enjoy yourself. Thanks for coming along. I hope you found good information in this. This is my first long form video, but I am planning on doing a lot more tutorial videos and covering tools and tool maintenance, especially related to the lathe. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to like, subscribe, and click that bell so you get notifications when all my new tutorials and long form videos come out.